The clock on my dashboard read 2:37 a.m. as I sped down the lonely stretch of Highway 16, nothing but darkness and the occasional reflective road sign to keep me company. I'd made this drive 100 times before, a necessary evil of my job as a traveling salesman, but something felt different tonight. The air in my car seemed thicker, heavier, as if charged with an electricity I couldn't quite explain. I shook off the feeling, chalking it up to too much caffeine and too little sleep. The radio crackled with static, unable to pick up a clear signal this far from civilization. I switched it off, preferring the hum of my tires on asphalt to the eerie white noise. That's when I saw her. A figure standing on the side of the road, arm outstretched in the universal sign for a hitchhiker. I blinked hard, certain my tired eyes were playing tricks on me. Who would be out here, in the middle of nowhere, at this ungodly hour? As I drew closer, my headlights illuminated her fully. She was young, maybe early 20s, with long dark hair that whipped around her pale face in the night wind. Her white dress seemed to glow in the darkness, untouched by the dirt and grime of the roadside. Every instinct told me to keep driving, to push the gas pedal to the floor and leave this strange apparition in my rearview mirror. But something, curiosity, compassion, or perhaps something darker, made me slow down. I rolled down my window, the cool night air rushing in. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The girl's face remained impassive, her eyes fixed on some point in the distance. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, yet somehow I heard it clearly over the rumble of my engine. "I need to get home," she said. "Can you take me there?" Against my better judgment, I found myself nodding. "Sure, hop in." As she settled into the passenger seat, I noticed two things that made my blood run cold. First, despite standing on the dusty roadside, her white dress was immaculate. Second, she left no footprints in the dirt as she walked to my car. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. "So, where's home?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw her eyes clearly. They were completely black, no whites, no irises, just endless pools of darkness. "Just keep driving," she said, her voice now a low, inhuman growl. "I'll let you know when we're there." My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I accelerated, my mind racing. What had I just invited into my car? I glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see an empty seat, but she was still there, those bottomless black eyes now fixed on me. The miles ticked by, the darkness outside seeming to press in on all sides. The girl, if that's what she was, remained silent, motionless except for the occasional twitch of her head, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Suddenly, she sat up straight, her hand shooting out to point at a barely visible dirt road branching off from the highway. "There," she hissed. "Turn there." Every fiber of my being screamed at me to refuse, to keep driving straight and never look back. But my hands seemed to move of their own accord, guiding the car onto the rough, unpaved road. The trees closed in around us, their branches scraping against the roof of my car like skeletal fingers. In the distance, I could make out the silhouette of an old, dilapidated house, its windows dark and empty. "Stop here," the girl commanded as we approached the decaying structure. I brought the car to a halt, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure she must hear it. The girl turned to me, a grotesque smile splitting her face, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. "Thank you for bringing me home," she said, her voice now a chorus of whispers. "Won't you come inside?" Before I could respond, she vanished, not opening the door and stepping out, but simply ceasing to exist in the blink of an eye. I sat there, frozen in terror, staring at the now empty passenger seat. A tapping on my window made me jump. I turned to see the girl standing outside, that terrible smile still on her face. Behind her, more figures emerged from the shadows around the house, their forms twisted and inhuman. I slammed the car into reverse, tires spinning in the dirt as I desperately tried to escape. As I fishtailed back onto the highway, I could hear an unearthly howl of frustration fade into the distance. I drove for hours, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, too afraid to stop until the sun began to peek over the horizon. As the first rays of dawn hit my rearview mirror, I finally allowed myself to breathe a sigh of relief. But my sense of safety was short-lived. For there, in the back seat, I saw a single long, black hair resting on the upholstery. The experience left me shaken to my core, but it was only the beginning of my encounters with the unexplainable on the lonely nighttime highways. In the months that followed, I found myself drawn to the road after dark, as if some part of me was seeking answers, or perhaps courting further terror. It was on one such night, about 6 months after my encounter with the hitchhiking entity, that I experienced something that made me question the very nature of reality. I was driving down a stretch of coastal highway, the ocean a vast, dark presence to my left, when the world around me began to shift. At first, it was subtle. The yellow lines on the road seemed to writhe and twist, as if alive. I blinked hard, assuming my tired eyes were playing tricks on me. But when I looked again, the distortions had only grown more pronounced. The trees to my right began to bend and sway, despite there being no wind. Their branches elongated, reaching out over the road like grasping hands. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white as I tried to focus on the road ahead. That's when I saw it, a shimmer in the air, like heat haze on a summer day. But this was no mirage. As I watched in horror, the very fabric of reality seemed to tear open, revealing a yawning void beyond. From this impossible rift emerged something. It defied description, its form constantly shifting and changing. One moment it seemed vaguely humanoid, the next it was a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes. The only constant was the sense of ancient, alien malevolence that radiated from it. I slammed on the brakes, my tires screeching in protest as I skidded to a halt. The entity hovered above the road, its impossible form blocking my path. A sound filled my head, not quite a voice but a sensation of communication that bypassed my ears and went straight to my brain. Witness, it seemed to say, the concept searing itself into my mind. Bear testament to what lies beyond. Images flooded my consciousness, vistas of alien worlds, civilizations that rose and fell in the blink of an cosmic eye, horrors that lurked in the spaces between realities. I felt my sanity begin to fray at the edges as I was forced to comprehend the true vastness and terror of the universe. Just when I thought my mind would shatter under the onslaught, everything snapped back to normal. The rift closed, the entity vanished, and the world around me returned to its familiar state. I sat there, gasping for breath, sweat pouring down my face as I tried to process what I'd just experienced. Had it all been a hallucination? A waking nightmare brought on by too many late nights on the road? But as I finally gathered the courage to continue driving, I noticed something that made my blood run cold, a small, iridescent scale resting on my dashboard, unlike anything found in nature. These encounters, as terrifying as they were, awakened something in me. A hunger for knowledge, a desire to understand the hidden truths of our world. I began seeking out others who had experienced similar phenomena, gathering their stories and piecing together a larger picture. I learned of phantom trucks that pursued drivers for miles before vanishing into thin air. Of stretches of road where time seemed to loop, trapping travelers in an endless night. Of gas stations that appeared like oases in the desert, only to disappear once the unsuspecting victim had entered. But it was the story of a fellow traveler named Mike that truly chilled me to the bone. He spoke of a night when he picked up a hitchhiker, an old man who seemed harmless enough. As they drove, the old man began to tell a story, his voice taking on a hypnotic quality. "Have you ever wondered," the old man had asked, "what really happens to all those people who go missing on the highways every year?" Mike had shrugged, uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. The old man continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They're taken. Harvested. There are things out there in the darkness. Ancient, hungry things that see our roads as feeding grounds." Mike had laughed nervously, trying to brush off the old man's words as the ramblings of a possibly unstable mind. But then the hitchhiker's appearance began to change. His skin grew pale and translucent, his eyes sinking into his skull until they were nothing but dark pits. "Things like me," the creature that had once been an old man hissed, lunging at Mike with inhuman speed. Mike's car had swerved off the road, crashing into a ditch. When he regained consciousness, the entity was gone. But carved into his arm were words that haunted him to this day: "We are always watching." As I collected more stories, patterns began to emerge. Certain stretches of highway seemed to be hotspots for supernatural activity. The witching hour, 3 a.m., appeared to be when the veil between our world and whatever lay beyond was at its thinnest. But the more I learned, the more questions arose. What were these entities that stalked the nighttime roads? Were they ghosts, demons, interdimensional beings, or something else entirely? And why did they seem drawn to the lonely highways and byways of our world? I found myself spending more and more time on the road, chasing leads and seeking out fellow experiencers. My job became a cover for my true obsession, unraveling the mysteries of the night highways. But with each new piece of the puzzle, I felt myself changing. The world seemed different now, the comforting illusion of normality stripped away to reveal the terrifying truths that lurked just beneath the surface. I began to notice things others didn't: shadows that moved against the flow of traffic, impossible geometries hidden in the patterns of streetlights, whispers on the wind that spoke of ancient, cosmic horrors. And always, the sense that I was being watched. That each time I set out on a nighttime drive, I was rolling the dice, never knowing if this would be the time I encountered something I couldn't escape. Yet I couldn't stop. The need to know, to understand, had become all-consuming. Even as I write this, I'm preparing for another journey into the heart of darkness, another night spent chasing the terrifying truths of the lonely highways. I don't know where this road will lead me, what horrors or revelations await around the next bend. But I do know this: the night is dark, the road is long, and the things that lurk in the shadows are always hungry. So the next time you find yourself driving down a dark, lonely stretch of highway in the dead of night, remember this: you're not alone out there. And not everything that walks on two legs is human. Keep your doors locked, your eyes on the road, and whatever you do, don't stop for hitchhikers. For in the world of nighttime driving, safety is an illusion, and terror is always just a headlight's beam away. As I continued my nocturnal investigations, I found myself drawn to a particular stretch of highway that locals referred to as the Whispering Mile. Rumors swirled about drivers who entered this section of road after midnight, only to vanish without a trace. Those few who did emerge spoke of lost time, inexplicable visions, and a sense of having brushed against something ancient and terrifying. It was just past 2 a.m. when I steered my car onto the Whispering Mile. The moment my tires crossed some invisible threshold, the air inside my vehicle seemed to thicken. The radio, which had been playing a late-night talk show, dissolved into static before going silent altogether. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white with tension. The headlights seemed to penetrate less and less of the darkness ahead, as if the night itself was growing denser, more resistant to illumination. That's when I heard it, a soft, sibilant sound just on the edge of hearing. At first, I thought it was the wind, but as it grew louder, I realized with dawning horror that it was coming from inside the car. "Join us," the whispers hissed, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Become one with the road did." I tried to accelerate, but my car began to slow down of its own accord. The speedometer needle dropped steadily, even as I floored the gas pedal. Panic rising in my throat, I reached for the door handle, intending to bail out if necessary. But the door wouldn't budge. None of them would. I was trapped inside as my vehicle came to a complete stop in the middle of the highway. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. In the rearview mirror, I saw shapes beginning to coalesce in the back seat, shadowy, half-formed things with too many limbs and eyes that glowed like dying stars. "You've driven our roads," the whispers said, now a chorus of unearthly voices. "You've sought our secrets. Now, it's time to pay the toll." Ghostly hands materialized, reaching for me from all directions. I screwed my eyes shut, bracing for whatever horrific fate awaited me. But instead of cold, spectral fingers, I felt a sudden rush of wind. I opened my eyes to find myself standing on the side of the road, my car nowhere in sight. The night around me had changed, taken on a quality that was somehow both hyper-real and dreamlike at the same time. A figure approached from the darkness, a man in an old-fashioned gas station attendant's uniform. His face was pleasant, unremarkable, but his eyes were black voids that seemed to contain entire galaxies. "Welcome, Seeker," he said, his voice normal yet somehow resonating on a frequency that made my bones vibrate. "You've come far in your journey. Are you prepared to learn the truth?" I wanted to run, to wake up from this nightmare, but something compelled me to nod. "Yes," I heard myself say. "Show me." The attendant's smile widened inhumanly. "Very well. But remember, knowledge comes at a price." He placed his hand on my forehead, and suddenly, I was everywhere and nowhere at once. I saw the highways of America as a vast nervous system, pulsing with otherworldly energy. Each car was a blood cell, carrying not just passengers, but dreams, fears, and untapped psychic potential. And feeding on this energy were things. Entities beyond human comprehension, ancient and hungry. They were the source of every roadside legend, every unexplained disappearance, every whispered warning about driving alone at night. I saw how these beings had shaped human history, influencing the development of the automobile, the creation of the interstate system, all to provide themselves with an endless buffet of human emotion and experience. But it went deeper than that. The visions showed me that reality itself was far more malleable than we realized. The liminal spaces of nighttime highways were thin spots in the fabric of our world, places where other dimensions could bleed through. I witnessed other realities, hellish landscapes where the roads were made of screaming faces, heavenly highways that led to enlightenment, and everything in between. And I understood that every journey, no matter how mundane it might seem, had the potential to become a cosmic odyssey. As the visions faded, I found myself back on the side of the Whispering Mile, the gas station attendant still standing before me. But now I saw him for what he truly was, a mask worn by something far older and more terrifying than I could comprehend. "Now you know," he said, his form flickering between human and something else. "The question is, what will you do with this knowledge?" I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. As they drew closer, I felt a sense of dread unlike anything I'd experienced before. The approaching vehicle was a large, black SUV with tinted windows. It pulled to a stop beside us, and the rear door opened. Inside, I glimpsed men in dark suits, their eyes hidden behind sunglasses despite the late hour. "It's time to go," one of them said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You've seen too much." The gas station attendant, the entity, placed a hand on my shoulder. "The choice is yours," he said. "Go with them and return to a world of comforting ignorance, or stay and embrace the terrifying truths of the highway." I stood frozen, torn between fear and an insatiable need to know more. The men in the SUV waited silently, their patience somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. In that moment, I realized that my life had become a horror story, one without a clear ending, where every choice led further into darkness. Whatever I decided, I knew I would never see the world the same way again. With a deep breath, I made my choice. Redacted by order of entity unknown, I blinked, and suddenly I was back in my car, driving down a perfectly normal stretch of highway. The sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. According to my dashboard clock, only an hour had passed since I entered the Whispering Mile. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination brought on by too many sleepless nights and an obsession with the unknown? I might have believed that if not for two things. First, there was a business card tucked into my sun visor that hadn't been there before. It was blank except for a single line of text that read, "The highway is calling. Will you answer?" Second, I could no longer look at the road the same way. In every shadow, I saw movement. In the patterns of oncoming headlights, I recognized symbols of power and terror. And always, I felt the weight of unseen eyes watching me. I knew then that my journey was far from over. The night highways had shown me a glimpse of a reality far vaster and more terrifying than I had ever imagined, and there was no going back. As I continued to drive, heading towards a destination I couldn't quite define, I realized that every car I passed held a potential story, a brush with the unknown, a dance with cosmic terror. How many of my fellow travelers were awake to the truth? How many were unwitting pawns in a game beyond human comprehension? The highway stretched out before me, an infinite ribbon of possibility and danger. I didn't know where it would lead me next, what horrors or wonders awaited around the next bend. But I knew I had to keep driving, keep searching, keep pushing against the boundaries of what I thought I knew. For the night is dark and full of terrors, but the highway is where those terrors come out to play. And I, for better or worse, had become a player in their cosmic game. So if you find yourself driving down a lonely stretch of road in the dead of night, and you see a pair of headlights in your rearview mirror that seem to have appeared from nowhere, remember this: not all who wander these highways are lost. Some of us are seeking. And what we're looking for might just be looking for you, too. Keep your doors locked, your eyes on the road, and your mind open to the impossible. For out here, in the liminal spaces between streetlights, anything can happen. And the next exit might just lead you out of this reality altogether. As for me, I'll be out there, chasing the next story, the next encounter, the next piece of the cosmic puzzle. If you see me at a late-night gas station or a 24-hour diner, feel free to share your own tale of highway horror. But be warned, once you start down this road, there's no turning back. The night highways have their own rules, their own logic, and their own hungry gods. And I've become both their chronicler and their willing sacrifice, driving ever onward into the heart of darkness, where the real horror stories are written in neon and asphalt, and every mile marker is a countdown to the next terrifying revelation. So the next time you're driving late at night and you feel that prickle on the back of your neck, that sense that something's not quite right, remember, you're not alone out there. The highways are alive, and they're always, always watching. Safe travels, fellow nighttime drivers. And remember, sometimes the real horror isn't what's waiting for you at your destination. Sometimes the real horror is the journey itself. As I pen these final words, I'm preparing for another night on the road. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and bruise. My car is fueled up, my camera and journal at the ready to document whatever strange encounters await me. I don't know if I'll make it back this time. Each journey into the unknown feels like a game of cosmic Russian roulette, with stakes higher than I can comprehend. But I can't stop now. The highway calls, and I must answer. If you're reading this, it means I've entrusted my story to someone, hoping that the truth, or at least the fractured, terrifying pieces of it that I've managed to glimpse, will survive. Perhaps it will serve as a warning, or perhaps it will call to others like me, drawing them into the endless night of the haunted highways. Whatever the case, remember this: the next time you're driving alone at night, and you see something strange in your headlights or hear an impossible whisper on the wind, know that you're not crazy. The world is vaster and more terrifying than we can imagine, and the highways are where the veil between realities wears thin. Stay safe out there. Keep your eyes on the road, your mind open to the impossible, and whatever you do, don't pick up any hitchhikers. For in the world of nighttime driving, every journey is a potential horror story, and not all of them have happy endings. This is where my tale ends, but the road goes ever on. Who knows what terrors and wonders await around the next bend? There's only one way to find out. The night is calling, and I must go. See you on the highway.